we are, the year-end cap of two guys in the cloud. So first, congratulations, Bob, on a inaugural year of this wonderful podcast. This has been a lot of fun. I've
It
enjoyed
has
it.
been fun. In a year with a lot of bad things, this has been really fun to do. So I appreciate working with you, and it's been a fun year doing the podcast. And we're going to talk a little bit about our year in review
Yeah,
and technology today, and talk a little bit about maybe some of the positive changes that we've seen from this kind of disastrous year and ways we can potentially make technology work for us better than it has in the past. So I
yeah.
think we're going to riff on that for a few minutes, and hopefully it'll be entertaining.
Yes, sir. I think, okay, so first of all, it's your idea to do this, which I think is a really good one. I think 2020's been, there's enough fatigue,
Yeah,
around it. And I think sometimes you really do have to pause and look back and say, okay, you know what? Not everything's bad. There are things that come out of this scenario that will be good. And it's important to pull those forward and talk about them. So that'll be our rule today, is to try not to get too dark in the
good.
conversation.
That's
Stay
good.
focused on the light. Look at the light,
That's right.
and then we'll go from there.
That's
But
right.
I guess the other part of our podcast today is our third voice being our silent partner and our producer, Blair Loveland. So Blair, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Well, glad to be part of the show. Usually, but then behind the scenes, I feel like that's with the old school, like the Hello World. When you release a new program, I feel like I'm the new voice and joining the show.
And
That's
people
right.
they're soaking it in right now as you speak.
That's right.
So it's all very good. So yeah, Bob. So let's just year in review. I mean, if you think about this incredibly important historic year and some of the things that have happened, clearly there's the one thread, the elephant in the room, as Blair has said before, that is, Corona or COVID-19. And that was the catalyst for so many things. So starting there, kind of as you think about it, where's the silver lining? Where's the light?
The light to me is how it forced America and the business world to be mobile, right? I think a lot of companies were doing it, and maybe we're doing it a little bit, but COVID pushed mobility to a different height in 2020, right? We had to work from home. We didn't have a choice. And, companies were either ready for that or they weren't ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this really pushed the ability to be mobile and be productive from anywhere, whether it's a Starbucks, whether it's at your home, whether it's on the beach on a vacation. Wherever you are, you can be as productive, hopefully, as you would be in a gigantic office working with hundreds of the closest colleagues. And to me, the force and mobility is the biggest change we're going to have, right? I think about even our kids that have been doing homeschooling and being really forced to do that. If when I was a kid, if you missed school or got mono or did something like that, you might have lost a year of your education and had to redo it. Now that's something you can do right from home. I'll give a recent example. A very famous ESPN college football announcer got COVID yesterday, or said he tested positive. The playoffs start on Friday, and he usually calls that, right? Kurt Herbstreit from ESPN. Mm-hmm. He can now do that and participate and do all that stuff from his home, just like he was announcing it from the stadium, right? And from a listener standpoint, you don't know the difference. And that's the kind of things I think will start to be a positive for us, is that productivity can be anywhere now. And that's been a saying for a long time, but I think we really forced it into action this year.
Yeah, and we hear, I think you've heard different variations of transformation is the term,
Right.
accelerating over 7 years, 10 years. I don't, and by the way, I don't have no idea how people come up with those numbers. Like who
Yeah.
is able to look in whatever model they have and say we've affected transformation by 10 years. I mean, who knows? But it clearly means that we have accelerated our world through technology in a meaningful way in terms of how we are productive, to your point. Um, and I think, so I have a couple thoughts as you were sort of going through that. Absolutely true for many types of businesses, but if you had a business that could not replace the notion of real in-person type interaction, there were limits to that transformational benefit.
For
So like
sure.
restaurants, for example.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that, maybe technology served them in a different way. And I think of things like my growing debt to Uber Eats. You know what I mean? Like like there's
Yep.
there's that, I mean, there are different mechanisms there. But so if we think about remote workers and the ability for our world to transform, there were different components that let that happen, and I think that that's part of the conversation too, right? So it wasn't magic that it happened. There were components in place that allowed for remote work productivity to exist in the way that it does today. So I think in terms of, our theme here, the cloud, right? I don't think you have the remote work productivity that we've talked about without the cloud for a whole bunch of reasons, like work group productivity solutions such as 365, the fact that, there were these consolidated data centers such as the cloud to provide the infrastructure in a financially accessible way for companies to pivot. Imagine that. Imagine if you were a company 10 years ago and this happened and you had to create a remote environment for your workers. You needed a data center to do that.
Yes, you did.
And that would have costed tremendous amounts of money and investment to do that. I mean, we are the fortunate component here is that there was this massive investment in place so that our world could pivot the way it did as quickly as it did and still be productive. That is to me, that's a tremendous silver lining. This could have happened 10 years ago and we would have been in real trouble. The fact
the economy would have been hit so much harder, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I also think that goes in line too, not just, I feel like sometimes the technology, when you go to work, whether it's a pizza shop or a 1,000-person call center or a big business, technology is often taken for granted. Whereas with especially with COVID and having to move everyone to a really remote workforce on a turn of a dime, means it really takes the technology experts and the resources and really that in tune logistical dance to be able to move an entire really infrastructure from being centralized to being decentralized to all these workers, in their homes, providing laptops or PCs and pushing out, VPNs and virtual remote desktops that are secure. Where again, like I said, if that was 10 or 15 years ago, it probably really would not have happened. Certainly not to I almost want to say the degree of efficiency that it happened, today, just because again of the cloud and of the expertise and the skill sets that a lot of the technology folks have today.
Yeah.
And also the applications that we already had, right? So let's use Microsoft Teams or Zoom as an example, right? A lot of times we were using these as collaboration tools for conference calls, and now there's so much more. Now they're bringing people together and we're using video, we're sharing, we're getting the full impact of a Microsoft Teams, which used to be Skype or a Zoom or a WebEx, just name it, right? We had this technology available and we might have been leveraging just one component of it. And now we can leverage the whole thing to truly collaborate like we should have been all along. And it's really forced us through that. But if we didn't have these, if Microsoft didn't have Skype or Teams and had to try to rush development or something like that, I mean, it would be terrible. But we had these collaboration tools available to us that made this transition much easier than it could have been.
Yeah, and then there was the investment that was poured in immediately after, in the sense that You know, like now we're having, dozens of windows up in front of us so we can see dozens of our teammates, as opposed to,
Yep.
I think when this whole thing started, it was 4 or 5, you know what I mean? Like, just as an example. But, what, and you mentioned this a minute ago, and I think it's the impact of this thing in a very productive way, I think, is going to be found and seen in years to come. But that's the children, right?
That's
So I don't know. I don't think I've spoken too much about this topic here, but my wife is a second grade teacher. And so I've been in this sort of journey, on the sidelines watching her as she's, her and these children have adapted to working remotely, being student in second grade, so
Yeah.
think about that,
That's
that
amazing.
age group. I mean, just, like, quick story. For the first time, she asked me to just sort of pop my head into the classroom, not that long ago, about 2 weeks ago. It was very impromptu, and thankfully I wasn't completely horribly looking at the moment. You know what I mean? But I popped my head in there and they asked me all these questions. It was actually really cute. Like, one kid asked me if I loved my Mrs. Barrett. Mr. Barrett's, do you love Mrs. Barrett's? I was like, a lot of pressure here, kid. Yes, of course I did. But but it was well, first thing that caught me was that I'm looking at her and I'm looking at these screens and there's like 20 some kids and they're all moving at the same time. I mean, they're second grade. They are all moving. And I got immediately nauseous looking at all these little kids bouncing all over the place. But, it's fascinating to me. I've watched and listened to her talk about her interaction with them. And these kids have very quickly become incredibly sophisticated and savvy in this environment, in this remote, digital environment where, again, second graders, their starting point in terms of technology is so early. I mean, we've seen this with other generations in the past, but I think this is completely different. This is them learning to socialize, to be productive at a very, very advanced way very early on in their lives. And it will be very interesting to see how this manifests in years to come. This generation is a very unique generation in terms of how they're going to change over time.
Right.
And then how our technology suits that, right? So I think that, I want to believe that'll be a silver lining in all this at some level.
Yeah, for sure it will be. I mean, because they are learning to communicate with technology as babies, right? And that's amazing. That really is amazing that they can even. I can't even imagine being 2 and sitting in front of a computer for hours, right? I couldn't imagine that. And they, even at a little part of that, they're able to do that and communicate and understand what's going on. It's just amazing leaps forward from a technology standpoint that I don't think we were expecting. And I think it's good. I really think it's good for things like the educational system, which I'm sure has been a little bit stuck in the old ages and, sometimes is pushed back on technology. This could really move that industry and other industries forward, maybe quicker than they thought. And being able to communicate this way, doing things like this, remotely. I'm in Florida, you're in Chicago, Blair's in Florida, another part of Florida. We're able to do this, remotely and communicate. I think it's a great steps in the right direction. So to me, that's probably the number. If I had to rate positive advances in technology this year, the push towards mobility and collaboration, which we've been forced to do, I think has been a big success.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, imagine just with the cloud technology, around the virtual reality and the AI. I think it was Inspire last year where they the virtual reality lenses. Imagine that being applied to a classroom environment instead of a student looking at just a computer all day. They put on the for example, a HoloLens, and they're in a virtual reality classroom, just like in a real classroom with all their.
Sure.
That's kind of amazing to think about.
Yeah, I think, gosh, I can't. I just know that technology's at such a, it's infantile stage. It's just so early even now. And I know that today we look at some of these things in virtual reality and are blown away. But there's so many use cases that are out there that have yet to be developed. I think it is, to your point, Blair, it is an interesting thing. So there's flavors of virtual reality. So for if we think about hardcore virtual reality, many people jump to, a product like Oculus, which is, not Microsoft. Actually, I think Oculus is owned by Facebook, and it's a complete immersive virtual reality experience that is very gaming in orientation. That's what you see if you go on the TV, you'll see that. But to your point, there's this other flavor of virtual reality, which is the Microsoft flavor, and it's not completely virtual. It's sort of like I think they call it it's not assisted reality. It's a pivot off of complete virtual reality, where if I have the goggles on, I'm still able to see my surroundings, but there are virtual components embedded within the experience that me and others can participate in, right? So it could be that there's, I'm looking at you and I'm looking at the screen, or I'm looking at the wall and I see my background, but an image, like this mouse, I'm holding up a mouse for those that are listening, it could be an artificial construct within what I'm watching. And then me and Bob could artificially begin to, manipulate that image if we want, and talk through it and, collaborate on the physical nature of it so that we can work together on something that is quasi-physical, even though we're, hundreds, thousands of miles apart, and I think that that's incredibly conducive to education down the road, right? To your point. And I think that will be playing out fast to this whole conversation in an accelerated rate that would have not, would have been years before we got there, but maybe now it'll be much sooner, which is it'll blow our minds, I think, in terms of what's going to happen in that regard. So let me ask this, right? So beyond, the individual, there's this amazing development, if you think about the vaccine, right? It was able to be developed and proven, or vetted, if we will, and now, in distribution and actually being administered within a year. And that's, not far, just way beyond anybody's expectations, I think, when this thing first started. One has to believe that we were able to do that because of technology advances that had occurred, prior to that moment. And we were able to leverage those to get where we are today. So along the lines of, thankfully, we're not in this situation 10 years ago, because we wouldn't have maybe had the computing power to deal with it. I imagine that, as Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Moderna, and they were all producing these things, they were using, the computing power that we take for granted now,
right,
in the cloud, right? I imagine.
I would assume,
I've never heard that story, but I imagine, I don't see how you could go through those sequences without that.
That's the power of the cloud as well,
right,
with all the high performance computing. And I remember way back in the day too that there was I forget who it was, if it was IBM or somebody, but they actually had a program where if you weren't using your computer at night, you could let them dial into it, use your compute power. But that's what it is today. The power of the Microsoft, all the data centers and that high performance computing, and even in some of the having access to those supercomputers like Cray and Big Blue to really do that modeling with the speed and technology, the chip advances and memory today. I even think that maybe a basic model that would have taken a year 10 years ago maybe takes a month today, just because of the available compute that's out there with the cloud. We have to, that has to be what it is.
You know what I wonder, and maybe this is far off and not correct, but I wonder if they worked with each other, these big pharmas, and shared results because it was too important not to, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if they collaborated, they use cloud, they use tools like we use. I'm just wondering if they did that, and maybe not, and maybe it was too important.
I think that's
from a corporate situation, but that, to me, that would be very interesting as well, how they came together to get the vaccine out the door.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do believe that there was that level of collaboration. I think I've heard that, but
okay.
But I think that brings up, again, the reality of us being able to collaborate the way we have,
right,
between distributed groups. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
And
also,
competitors,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
And this would be a situation where it's competitors for a common good, right? And that's amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bringing competitors together to fix a huge need like this is amazing.
It makes me think of security. in the sense that, I'm sure in collaborating between competitors, there had to be some, boundaries established, some levels of
Right.
security, you know what I mean? And I think, there is clearly this direct correlation between, technology and as it accelerates in our dependency and how important security is and has become. And we've covered that, here in this podcast before. And I have one has to imagine that this year has created an accelerated value or sense of security, which, it's sort of like a negative positive, I mean, it's a negative that we have to worry about security, but it is a positive that in this environment, it's accelerated awareness of security. And maybe what that's led to is greater attentiveness of it. Maybe
Right.
there's greater adoption to security measures, greater investment, that may be the case as well.
Yeah, I mean, security, I think, to your point, has always been important. But when we get mobile and, people hack into certain areas or do certain things, they're always going to be the bad guys out there. And being able to protect your data, protect your identities is always going to be so important. But I think you're right. Since we're all mobile now, I think it's got a greater focus because people now really can feel and touch it. And it's really something that's going to always be important in technology. There's no way around it. Whether you've got hosting a data center or you have a big cloud presence, security is always going to be such a important topic to keep things secure in your environment and making sure you keep the bad guys out, whether it's competitors or just somebody, the ransomware. I mean, that to me is just that business model of ransomware and basically making your data hostage, and companies that pay that, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, yes. We will stay focused on the light. I will not go into.
Yeah, that's right. We slipped into the dark there.
Yeah, no, it's so easy. But okay, so here, staying focused on the light. I've got a good one.
Okay, good.
It as you and I and Blair have had the we've had the privilege, and it's been wonderful to work together for a number of years now, and we have all watched Bob, particularly you and I, travel a lot in years past, where we've been, I mean, gosh, I went through weeks of just being gone, week after week after week after week, and that honestly has been the thread in my career for over 20 years, a lot of travel. This year, of course, I haven't traveled. And I've been home, all the time with my family. And that has been wonderful. I mean, it is, it has been wonderful. And I miss travel clearly. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. I think that, if you like travel, it's hard to just sort of completely abandon it. So I miss it. But it has been wonderful to be with my family over this year and still feel productive and gainfully productive and employed and all the things that have come with the situation that we have in our business. But man, that's a silver lining for me. Is to be with my family and to spend so much time and want to spend all the time that I have with them. So that's been good. I'll call that good.
Yeah, and even like the kids are home from school, right? Yeah, so they're not. Most of them are not even going to school. I know some areas are open and doing regular classroom learning, but most are still remote. So, we have the kids in the house almost 24/7, right? Depending on the state you're in, and it's good to have that time, and it's really kind of like you said, set another level of the family together, because it's really forced everyone to be together. So that you're right, from a togetherness standpoint, that is probably the top of the list for sure. So it's been fun to do that. Both Ellie and I have freshmen in college, and this year has kind of been different for them. My son went to college and was doing a lot of things, even though he was there, still remotely. So he kind of feels like at least his first semester, got gypped a little bit of the college experience overall. He's been home since Thanksgiving, but it's great to have him home. But on the flip side, he would prefer a regular college experience, and I hope that in the next 6 months he can come closer to that, even though, maybe not yet. Maybe it'll take till next year or next fall term. But that's one area that has been really interesting. Colleges, for example, I think need the revenue of people being on campus to stay afloat, because that revenue is important to them, even though they may be mostly remote. So, from that standpoint, I think he got gypped. I'd be really interested to see what your son thought down in Arizona.
Yeah. So my son is a freshman at University of Arizona down in Tucson, and his experience was on campus for the semester. So the way that went down at U of A was we got him out there, which gave us one of the we were able to travel twice during this whole time, and that was the 2 times we went out to Tucson, and that gave us our first taste of what it was like to travel in this very interesting year. And one of the horrifying moments in that was going to the airport bar, ordering a Kim Crawford, a glass of Kim Crawford. And I kid you not, it was like $30 for a 6-ounce pour. And that was when I realized my limit. When I'm like, yeah, it's too much money. I'm not going to spend on that, and
That's right.
that was horrifying. But so we were able to get him down to Tucson, and his experience was, good. Yeah, I mean, it's like mixed bag, of course. I think he was able to adjust in a way that he was very productive. He had a very good semester. I think he benefited from not having the distractions of a typical first semester freshman, and because they had to stay in their dorms, and there were all these.
Blair, did we lose him or did you lose me?
I think we may have lost him there for a minute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. You're back.
Yeah, you were
okay.
Frozen for about 20 seconds there.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, like he, I think he was able to sort of get around, some of those distractions and be productive. And so I think that was good. He came home in Thanksgiving, and that was the plan. The way the school set it up was come back for Thanksgiving, finish up your semester, the final 2 weeks from home, which he did.
Right. Same here.
And, and he'll be going back the first week of January. So,
yep.
I mean, I do chalk up one of the benefits being that he was able to focus, and that was good. But he is very, very, excited about getting to a more normal experience, just like your son.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he will.
What's interesting from a travel standpoint, I traveled once. I had a friend that got married in Phoenix, so we traveled out there this fall, and security lines are much shorter at the airport.
Silver lining. You know what? I mean, also along those lines, traffic, if you're driving at all, it's much better, at least here in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago.
Way better. So yes, good call. I like that.
And we had it was 3 of us traveling in our party, and we had a whole row to ourselves because they had every other seating in the airplane. So there was some travel benefits.
Yeah,
and travel is very cheap right now.
Yes, it is. My daughter, just side note, my daughter flew to Tampa, and she was in Tampa for a few days, and it cost us like $80. I kid you not, like $80 to get her there and back. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, it was, I think, under $200 a piece to fly from Orlando to Phoenix.
Yeah.
So it's just, that opportunity to travel and not have a million people at an airport, having a mask on for 4 to 7 hours or whatever, how long your trip is not the best thing in the world. But that was a really nice travel experience. You want to be safe, of course, when you do that, but the airport and the congestion and everything you do to try to catch a plane was a much positive scenario. And I kind of feel like 2020 is going to be our security line at the airport type of change that we're going through, right? And that was a huge change for everybody after 9/11, but one we all understood. I think there'll be changes. Waiting in line to get your Chipotle and having, a person 1 inch in front of you versus 6 feet. Hopefully we can make some of those changes as well. Because
Sure.
I don't like standing in line and feeling like I'm a sandwich. So hopefully we can, keep the pacing, do some of those things that made us smart, whether the virus and pandemic is active or not. I think it's important that we, kind of keep some of the social distancing and be smart about it as we move forward as well.
Yeah. I actually, you made me think about something. So we'll talk, when we talk about transformation, we talk about transforming business, but what we don't get to frequently is how those industries sometimes in these moments are able to reinvest, innovate, and alter the outcome of their industry in very meaningful ways, right? So the clearest example I can think of is the auto industry after the real estate bubble burst, right? So if you kind of go through the points in time, the real estate bubble bursts, and then there's this massive recession that follows. You'll remember that the auto industry was at risk. The entire supply chain was at risk. I mean, the auto industry was going to go bankrupt, and there was a massive infusion of funds from the government into the auto industry, and in effect it did allow the auto industry to recalibrate and to restructure the kind of cars that were coming out of that ecosystem. So today we have that acceleration in terms of electronic cars, and like if you seriously, if you look at the E-Mustang is probably an outcome of that reset, if you think about it like that. And there are many others, right? So, I wonder, this year, there have been industries that have collapsed or have come close to collapsing, and there will be massive infusion in capital as our economy normalizes again, because they were viable industries before.
Yep.
And, in a normal economy, they will be viable industries again, and capital will come in. And it'll be interesting to see what that reset looks like. And I think about the restaurant industry in some ways, in the sense that there are hundreds of thousands of restaurants that have gone out of business in this year. And the truth is that demand for food is still going to be there, and what's going to happen is next year there will be countless new restaurants that'll spring up. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, like what's going to be the reinvention of that, right?
Yeah.
Still be food, of course, but who knows what'll come out of it. And I wonder what else will spring forward.
How about movie theaters? Right.
Exactly. Great call. Yeah.
Right. Movie theaters. I think Warner Brothers said they're putting all of their releases in the theaters and on HBO Max this year, right? And Christmas Day, they had a huge release of Wonder Woman.
I saw it.
And I did as well. And that was interesting. It was groundbreaking, really, to me. And I was telling my family as we were watching it, this is kind of cool because this is a different change that we've ever seen. And it's going to force an industry that's been struggling to reinvent itself. I mean, do we really want, $12 popcorns and $5 candies? Let's figure out a way to do that, because there's a place for movie theaters here. Let's try to figure out what that is, so we can bring people back to that and enjoy that, because it's important to get out of the house and do those kind of things. But let's figure it out and let's innovate so we can save that industry.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I had the same reaction to the. I did the same thing. I went to HBO Max. I saw that, it was this Wonder Woman 84, WW 84, or whatever it is, and that it was available. I started playing, and I was super excited about that. And then, of course, I'm flashing back to the 80s, which was a trip. I mean, we really did wear that stuff, and we really did look like that. And I thought that was actually kind of funny. What'd you think of the movie?
I didn't love it. I thought it was kind of long. And it was long, and I wasn't really loving the storyline either. I thought it was a bit played, but
Yeah, no, I So just, a riff on that whole superhero movie line. First, I'll tell you, I think that the Marvel line is way better than the DC line. That's just my opinion. I will say that I did watch the Batman versus Superman Ultimate Edition, and if you've got the patience for a 3-hour movie, it's way better, way better than what was put out, originally. But I thought this Wonder Woman, was not great. She's great. I think she's a great Wonder Woman.
Great.
I mean,
Yep.
I think she does a great job. But I think you're right. The storyline was kind of weird and not great. But
I'm not too much of a Star Wars guy, but I grew up in the '80s when Star Wars was huge, and it was a big thrill on how many times you saw Star Wars originally.
Yes.
Oh, we saw it 7 times. Oh, wow. But I tell you what, The Mandalorian on Disney is fantastic. It is unbelievably good. And I just imagine the people that are really into Star Wars are just loving that, because for the longest time we went with nothing, tens of years of no, Star Wars stuff. And now they're getting Mandalorian, basically mini movies every week. And it was just fantastic. It was so well done that it was just amazing to me. And just seeing these things, what HBO does, making movies, Game of Thrones, where it was like an hour movie every week. It's amazing to me where we've come with that technology, and the availability of content.
Yes.
Is ridiculous. We have Netflix, we have HBO Max, we have name your streaming service, for almost unlimited content is just incredible. And again, that's something that helped us through the pandemic, right?
I mean, I think it's twofold. I think it was, very fortunate that we were in a state where we could draw on that, keep everybody a bit sane. And then I have to imagine that, the investment in that space has just doubled, because of the way it's proven out. So I would call absolutely. I think that's silver lining. That's the light. That's part of the light.
That's right.
Yes.
Convenience is the key.
What else? I mean, what else do we see, you think, from a silver lining over the year?
Yeah, sports has been a bit of a downer. So that to me, I'm glad that they got to play. I think the NBA bubble was well. Hat tip to the NFL for getting through a season. Baseball got the World Series in a small season. So, on one hand, it was good to have that normal sports back. On the other hand, it wasn't quite all there. The fan experience, I think, has been difficult, because that is, for guys like us that love our sports, it was kind of difficult to watch sometimes. And I'm not sure the product was all there, but being able to see the games, I think, was really important. And even though we were seeing them virtually or on TV or what have you on your phone, having sports back, even in a small amount, I think helped society, at least in America, for the sports fans, because there's so many of them. Because for a lot of people, I think March 11th was when sports shut down. A lot of people, the pandemic became real that day. For a lot of people. And having it come back and having some even small successes, I think, was a positive this year. Seeing people get out there and play. A side note, Blair and I live in Florida, and golf, which was in a big decline, saw a humongous jump up in sports, because it's basically social distance, and golf courses never closed here, and you were able to go out and play golf, and as long as you were 6 feet from the playing partner, people were taking 4 carts instead of 2. But that's another positive thing that we've seen, is people getting out and doing things that maybe were new to them or something they haven't done in a long time. So those are the kind of things, positive wise, from a sports standpoint, that I think made an impact.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's fair. It's funny. It's like, you always want to go. I find myself in that story doing what you did, which was going first to it's too bad, I miss it like this, blah, blah, blah. But you're right. It served a very important purpose, even in its abridged, presentation, right? It was still did. It was still, I can tell you that I'm still watching the Bears, sadly. And it's they're
They have
making
a lifeline now.
they're
Remember
making me
you thought
so
they were
mad.
gone.
I am so mad. It's why it's like a tease. It's one big tease. And I can't, here's the other thing. Like right now, I know we play Green Bay this weekend, and we have to win, or the Cardinals have to lose for us to get into the postseason. And I'm at this point with the Bears Packers experience, just it's all dead to me because Aaron Rodgers has destroyed my faith. And what's going to happen? I mean, in a best case scenario, they beat the Packers and then they go into the playoffs only to lose, right? So, this is me ranting on the Bears. I'll be okay, but it's even. But you're right. I mean, even having that distraction, is healthy and it's important. It gets me outside of normal everyday drama. I mean, so it is good. I need my artificial drama.
It is. Well, I think we're here at the end of our time. So, I'd like to wish all of our listeners Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. And, we're going to have a lot of new fun guests and a lot of new fun things in 2021 as we kick this bad year and its backside out of here. And, want to thank everybody for taking this journey with us. And it's going to be fun as we gallop into a new year.
Well said, Mr. Agnew. Thank you. I look forward to 2021 as well, and wish you and Blair and all the folks out there a wonderful new year, and we'll see them on the other side.
Definitely. Happy New Year.
All right.